Hi there. This is my third one take video. This one is going to be on Sherlock Holmes, but actually it's more like my 15th take. In that I, did one recording and crashed. I did another one, thought it was fine, but for some reason my new computer had shut off the microphone, so I spent another hour trying to get the mic back on. I think I've succeeded. If you're seeing this and hearing this, I did. But hopefully I won't have to dwell on technical issues in the future. First, I want to talk about going to the movies. Once or twice a summer, I'll put down my 10 or 12 or 14 or 16 bucks, depending if it's 3D or not, to go see a big blockbuster movie. Um, but what I want to remark upon is, well, I'm going to talk about that movie in a moment. But first, the previews. There were 5 previews that I watched, and 4 of them uh, featured apocalyptic scenarios. That is, films that dealt with the end of the world. It's understandable that that would, make it to the big screen because, that's a great formula for, blowing things up, destroying major landmarks, and all sorts of things like that that are very exciting. But it speaks to our cultural moment. 4 out of 5 says something about our current preoccupations, our current hopes and fears, mostly fear, as a culture. And I will say one of the previews I saw was for World War Z, which is an upcoming film with Brad Pitt about zombie wars and what have you. The interesting thing there is that it's an adaptation of a literary work called World War Z. I forget who the author is. Used to have a copy, lent it out. Probably never see it again. But it's a good book. The reason I was interested in it was because it was an oral history of a zombie war. So it had a sort of this documentary verisimilitude to it that I really appreciated. I hadn't seen a zombie story in that form before. So it was interesting. I mean, the interesting thing about it is that, I mean, how do you adapt an oral history to film as opposed to a novel? So it raises all sorts of interesting issues about adaptation, which behooves me to go check out when the movie comes out. So I'll probably see it just for that reason. Just for this class, I will do it for you. Uh, okay, so Apocalypse Now, which actually is a film I'm going to be teaching next fall in my English 245 class, in case anyone is interested. So the film I went to see was Star Trek Into Darkness. So I had seen the original reboot by J.J. Abrams. I liked it, and so I wanted to see the second one, but I was particularly excited about the possibility of Benedict Cumberbatch playing the villain. Since I admire his work, and I'll say more about it in a moment. But Cumberbatch comes from a long line of English thespians that are very, very well trained. Uh, tend to tread the boards in Shakespearean roles and what have you. It really owns the voice. So it's their voice really that sort of becomes part of their brand as actors. And I'm thinking along with Cumberbatch, Sir Ben Kingsley, who's the villain in Iron Man, or say Sir Ian McKellen, who plays Magneto, the villain in the X-Men movies. So there's something about putting in the role of a villain these great thespian actors with great voices. And in fact, in Star Trek, we get introduced to Cumberbatch by his voice before we actually see him. So again, the voice becomes part of the brand. It's part of what we recognize about the actor. So Cumberbatch, he does have sort of a very mellifluous, plummy, British accented voice, and that's why we hear those people on commercials as well, for the same reason, for their voice. So I'm gonna come back to this at the end of this video just to talk about the idea of adapting literary voice onto film. But I want to talk about Sherlock Holmes, and one of the reasons why I bring up Cumberbatch is because he plays Sherlock Holmes in a current up updated version, modern telling of Sherlock Holmes. Um, and I find it to be an excellent series. They've done 6 of them so far, and I've seen the 6 that are done. There's 3 that are in production that will be coming out. These are all feature length um, Sherlock Holmes films. But I like Cumberbatch in the role. He plays it as a high functioning sociopath, which I find refreshing um, and closer actually to Conan Doyle's conception. I also like the way in the series that Sherlock Holmes is adept at social networking, and that becomes a very vital part of the stories of the updated Sherlock Holmes. It's interesting that a sociopath would be so adept at social networking, but there it goes. Uh, I also like the fact that the Sherlock series with Benedict Cumberbatch is they make the attempt to adapt the literary work, the stories of Arthur Conan Doyle. So, for instance, the first one they did was called A Study in Pink, which was based on A Study in Scarlet by Arthur Conan Doyle, which I believe is the story that introduces Sherlock Holmes to the world. So, the creators of Sherlock tried to, I mean, obviously pick that story for a reason, the first one, and have made attempts throughout all of the episodes to take versions of Arthur Conan Doyle and um, well, update them. And um, again, they make the attempt to adapt a literary work, as opposed to Elementary, which is the best new drama on television. This a new Sherlock Holmes, also updated version of the stories, but brings it to New York City as opposed to Britain. Sherlock Holmes in that show, Elementary, is played by Johnny Lee Miller, also a Brit, also a wonderful, plummy British accented voice, Shakespearean trained, all that. So he brings that to the role, and I like him in the role. But in general, I find the writing of this series to be kind of lame, in that they tend to rely on serial killer plots, which I really don't like. I find serial killer plots to be narrative laziness, but also it speaks to our current obsession with violence and what I call murder inflation, in that on police procedurals and what have you, one murder is no longer enough. It usually has to be at least 2, maybe 3, and that's part of the preoccupation, obsession with serial killer stories. So anyway, I don't like that stuff. And I don't like in Elementary that they don't really make an attempt to adapt any of the stories by Arthur Conan Doyle. It's just a basic formulaic police procedural, not that much different than, say, a CSI or Law and Order and whatnot. So, I mean, if you like that sort of show, it's pretty well done. But if you want an adaptation of Arthur Conan Doyle, look elsewhere. For instance, at the Cumberbatch Sherlock, which actually I thought very hard and long about, switching out the Guy Ritchie Sherlock Holmes with the Cumberbatch acted Sherlock, because I just think it's so well done. But in a sense, it's too well done, in that it's it doesn't provide us anything to think about and wrestle with the way Guy Ritchie's Sherlock Holmes does. Sherlock Holmes isn't a great movie. Arguably, Sherlock with Cumberbatch is better, but the Guy Ritchie version, it does bring up some very, very interesting questions about the adaptation. So I think I can stop with that. I'm going to go a little bit further. Just talk about voice. So again, an actor can be known by his voice, and many writers are known by their voice. But the voice of an actor is something you can easily put on film. The voice of a writer, not so easy. So we're going to see this problem again and again. So I think even though it's updated, the Sherlock with Cumberbatch is a little better at sort of recreating the British voice anyway. But that's another interesting thing about the elementary, the American updated Sherlock, and Sherlock, the British updated Sherlock Holmes, in that they, both English-speaking countries, Anglophone countries, but different cultures, and those are reflected in the two different versions of Sherlock Holmes. And that the same goes for all of the many, many, many versions of Sherlock Holmes that you can see out there. So I'll stop there. Hopefully this will upload and I don't have to worry about these issues anymore. See you online.